In this video, I'm going to be talking about alternative fingerings on the saxophone, some of the common ones and some of the less common ones that we might come across. I'm also going to be talking about this book here, or using this book as an example of ways that we can implement these alternative fingerings in a very interesting way. This is the Hyacinth Closer 25 Daily Exercises book, but it's the re-edited version by Timothy McAllister. It is the standard version of this book now, but it offers some very, very interesting ways that we can implement these alternative fingerings within these exercises. Just gives us a way to get them under our fingers in a more musical way. The first fingering I want to talk about that has more than one fingering for it is the B flat. Now, the standard B flat, or the B flat that you're probably taught to start with, is an A, so two fingers down at the top, and your bottom side key, so the third side key down, or the first one that you get to from the bottom. And that's what I would say the standard B flat. The next one from that's the most useful, I feel, on the sax is what's called the bis B flat key. And that's where our first finger, instead of just covering that first key at the top there and pushing that down, we actually overlap that finger over the first two keys. Now, we usually miss that one out when we play the A, but we're going to cover both of those keys and push them down at the same time. This is called the bis B flat. Don't need anything with my right hand here. I can just play B flat with my index finger of my left hand. Now, one thing to mention about this B flat, we don't like, or we shouldn't really be sliding between that key and that key. If we're moving chromatically, it's not really that accurate. We can do, and if I'm honest, I do it sometimes, but as best practice, we want to try and keep our fingers nice and secure. So if we're moving chromatically between a B and a B flat, we would usually move between the B and then the B flat with the side key. So that B there and the B flat with the side key. The other B flat that we've got is the long B flat. Now, this one isn't used as often, but it is a good thing to have in our toolbox because we sometimes need it, or it's sometimes a little bit easier to move from an F to this type of B flat. So this long B flat, we call, is the first finger on the top hand and your first finger on your bottom hand. So you can see if we were moving from an F to a B flat, this would make it quite easy because we can leave our right hand in position and take the second and third finger off at the top. The standard fingering for an F sharp is with our three fingers at the top and our middle finger at the bottom. Quite a normal F sharp key, but we can also play it, usually used when we're playing chromatically from our F. We can also use our auxiliary F sharp, which is this one here. If you have an F sharp key, that's the one at the top. The alternative forked F sharp key is this one here. So I will play a normal F and hit this key here. Very useful when we're trilling between those two keys, or like I said, chromatically. It stops us having to swap these two fingers around, which is sometimes quite a weak point of the instrument. Moving your first finger and swapping it for your middle finger. We can avoid that by using our forked F sharp key just there. We use our fourth finger for that, our ring finger, to press that one down. Again, it's a very useful one, particularly when we're playing something quite quick and quite chromatic. It doesn't always work for every finger combination. Say I was playing an F sharp and I wanted to get down to a D. That's not going to work because I'm not going to be able to get that fourth finger down to that key without getting an extra sound. The next finger I want to talk about is the G sharp. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, the G sharp doesn't have any alternatives. We play our G sharp with our G sharp key. But actually, we can use any of these bottom keys here with our left little finger for a G sharp. So G sharp, the normal fingering. But we can also use the G sharp using the C sharp key, or the B key, or the B flat key. Quite a useful thing to use if we were moving down from say a G sharp to a C sharp. That's definitely going to be helpful because we don't need to move our left little finger. And again, the same thing applies if we're moving from a low B to a G sharp, or even a low B flat and a G sharp. So that is when the alternative G sharp fingerings will come in useful. The alternative for a middle C, a normal C, is used in very much the same way as we used our F sharp key down here. It stops us having to swap our first finger for our middle finger between a B and a C. So if we play a normal B and we now use our middle side key at the side, not the bottom one which is the B flat, not the top one which is the E, it's the middle key here which is our side C, just called our side C. We push down our first finger for a B and we can move up to a C. This fingering also works between a bis, B flat and the C. The next fingering is slightly less common to use, but again a very useful one, and that's between a C or a C sharp and the D above it. Now it's quite obvious what the issues are with this. Moving from fewer fingers being on the instrument to nearly all of your fingers being on the instrument is the classic part of the saxophone that we call over the break, and it's quite a tricky thing to get used to, especially when you first start playing the sax. Certainly something to work on, get those fingers working really securely between them two notes. Making sure all of your fingers are moving at exactly the same time is definitely something to work on. So this isn't an alternative fingering that should be used instead of working on that. You should always be working on good finger technique between a C and a D, or a C sharp and a D. This is a really good alternative when you're playing something maybe quite quick, or it's a trill, or a certain decoration that you've got in the music. And what we're going to do is play a normal C, a middle C with just your middle finger, and we're going to nudge our what we call C2 key, which is our E flat key on the side, our E flat palm key. So the second palm key that we will push down in order if we were moving chromatically up the instrument, which is why it's called the C2 key. Not your D key, it's the next one up, and it's only this one that we push. We don't add our D key as well as our E flat key. We just press down our E flat key, and I'm going to try and show you this by playing like this so you can see quite clearly which one I'm pressing. But we would play it with our left hand like this. Now you can hear that the tuning isn't great on that, and it is something to work on. Make sure you're working on that tuning between those two notes. It's always going to be a little bit off with the tuning on that, but it is certainly something to work on. The other thing that we could do as well is move from a C sharp, no fingers, to that D as well. Now it depends on the instrument make, it depends on the instrument size, to really experiment with this and see what works best for you. Some instruments I find that moving from a C sharp to a D, we can just use our D palm key. Some instruments like this one I'm playing here, this tenor Yamaha sax, I'm pushing down my C2 key again between the C sharp and the D because it seems to work a little bit better. I'll show you the example of both. So from a C sharp to a D, I'll do the normal fingering to start with. And then with the C2 key. And then I'll play it with the C1 key, so just the palm key D here. Can you hear how that's a little bit flat? Yeah, for me it's a little bit flat. It's going to take a little bit too much work for me to bring that note up in tune. So whereas the C2 key is maybe a touch sharp, I'm able to lip that down a little bit so I'll be able to get it more in tune. Again, these are not fingerings that you're going to linger on. They're not fingerings, alternative fingerings to be used instead of the sound of a long D. If you can play the long D and your fingers can get around it, then use the long D. If you've got a trill, you're not going to be able to trill between a C and a long D. A long D I'm talking about with all of your fingers down. If it's a very quick passage and you just need that quick D, by all means use one of these palm keys. But experiment with your instrument as to which one sounds the best and which one is the most in tune. So this video is all about exercises. Why have I gone on about those alternative fingerings so much without even talking about an exercise? Well, that is where this book now comes in. And I'm going to show you the first page of this book, the first exercise of this book. along with a very, very useful fingering chart, which gives you an idea of the different fingers and different keys that you're going to be using to get these alternative fingerings within this exercise. So let's have a look at the first page of this exercise book. Now we can see, if we were comparing it with the fingering chart diagram, the N in the second bar is normal fingering, so we would use our normal D fingering for that. The C2 at the end of the line, we used that as an example in the fingerings that I showed you earlier. The C2, remember, is the E flat key, so we would play that D with the E flat key. On the third line down, bar 10, the TC is the side C that we talked about. So that middle key on the side with our normal B fingering. The N again at the end of bar 10 is normal fingering. The L underneath the next C and the plus C is just telling us to add our bottom C before we get to the low C. Just helps us get that lower C out a little bit easier. Again, the N in the next bar means normal fingering. We'll skip through now to a newer notation. If we look at bar 25, we have the TF above the F sharp. That is the auxiliary F sharp key, or the chromatic fork F sharp fingering. Again, it's useful when it's chromatic, and in this instance it is chromatic. As we move through the book, obviously the fingerings become a little bit more complex, and they become a little bit more few more combinations to add in there. Not some of them that you think, well, why do I even need that? But that's the point of an exercise book. The exercise book forces you into parts of the instrument and certain fingerings on the instrument that you wouldn't normally use. That's why this book is so useful, because it gets you into those areas and it gets you thinking about which fingers you could use, because then them fingerings are in your toolbox. You're able to use them when you come up against one of these problems with a piece of music and think, well, hang on a minute, have I got an alternative there that can make this a little bit easier? Have I got an alternative there that's going to make that sound even better? It's not a cheat. It's not something to make it easier just because you can't get your fingers around it. As I said, it's always good to be working on good finger technique. We must make sure we work on good finger technique and working all the time on making things exactly right as the fingering should say. But there are certain instances where it's just not going to be possible to play that quick between the F and the F sharp and get it smooth and get it use the alternative. That's what it's there for. There's going to be an example where you're trilling between a B and a C. Well, you're not going to be able to do that too quick between your first and second finger, swapping them around really quickly. So use your side C key. That's what it's there for. And like I said, this book is a brilliant book for forcing you into those little areas of the instrument that you might not be too familiar with. I have then hopefully given you the practical and the visual way of playing these different keys and playing these different notes, and then implementing it into this book is going to make it all come together.